Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, Georgia communities, and welcome to the DCA Lunch and Learn series. Can everyone hear me today? Thumbs up. Terrific. Today's webinar topic are REBA and EDGE grants from A to Z. Like our previous webinars, this can be found on the DCA YouTube page a couple of days after this recording, and we'll have our communications team put that up in case you need to share it with any colleagues who couldn't join us today. So why A to Z? Well, as many of you know, or may be interested to know, REBA and EDGE grants are often large discretionary grants thought of as deal closers. And yes, keeping industry here in Georgia, the #1 state to do business 9 years running, is important work. And it's about enhancing industry, bringing industry, being ready for expansion, ultimately job creation. And we know that's important work, and you in the audience, you negotiate and you lead that work. So we want to help. The panel today will take you from A to Z. A being the ask, how do we even get this going? To Z, a zero balance, which is a sign of a successful grant being used well. So our panelists, Danitha, Sarah, and Sharon, are the program experts at our partner agencies, GDEC and DCA, and they will walk you through the steps today. I'm Tracy Sanchez. I'm in Region 3 in Metro Atlanta, but we have a statewide audience joining us today. When you might see me in this process is once you guys have done all the hard work and I do a site visit just to check on compliance, or any of my colleagues across the state in our other regions do the same. As we chat today, feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions. We do have time at the end. And I'm going to kick us off right away. Danitha is up first, followed by Sarah and Sharon. Here's my question to you to guide the conversation, Danitha. Start us off with the definition of these acronyms, REBA and EDGE, so that people know what we're talking about. And walk us through the ask. In very simple terms, how does an industry partner arrange these deal closers, or do they? Take it away, Danitha.
All right, Tracy, thank you for having me today. I'm really happy to be here and explain my part of this process, which is very small. But we have two types of deal closing incentives that we're going to talk about today, REBA and EDGE. And the main important distinction is that REBA can be used anywhere throughout the state. It is not limited to any certain geographical region, population, anything. EDGE, however, is those funds are designated rural communities, but the way that it is written, there are really only 8 counties that are not eligible for EDGE. So many of you, particularly in the Metro Atlanta region, have seen that we've typically used REBA primarily in the past for that region. But now, as we're starting to balance things out a little bit more with our budgets, we are using EDGE in some of the more outer metro community. So the application process is virtually the same. It's just 2 separate funds, and there are those restrictions on the EDGE portion. So how do we get these funds? Well, when we start working a project, we are looking to see, A, if there is a need that the company has that we can help fund, whether that is land acquisition, site improvements, infrastructure, construction, or FF&E. And identifying that need helps us figure out what we can do to assist this company. But also, whether this is a new location to Georgia or an expansion of an existing company, it has to be a competitive project. Whether it's with another country or with another state, there has to be that competitive aspect. And also for a new location, we want to make sure that the company has narrowed their search down to a single Georgia location community. So once we deem that the company is reputable, that they've got the funds in case we were to ever have to claw back on the grant, there's a way to do that, and that there is a need that we can help fulfill, we prepare a project profile. And That is a template that we use. It's a very standard thing: company description, project description, list of community incentives. It also tells recent grants in that county or surrounding counties. It's not one in that particular county, to kind of make sure that we are kind of following a pattern here. And those profiles are presented directly to Governor Kemp by Commissioner Wilson, and they discuss what the project needs, where it's going, what the average salary is going to be, and from there they decide what we would like to do as a state, if we would like to do anything, and what that would. Sometimes there are instances where we say, we're not going to put any discretionary funding on the table. There are instances where we, of course, do. Usually by the time that we get to this point where we're preparing office, we're typically going to do something to assist the project. But that is up to the governor's discretion, with the commissioner's advice and guidance. And so once that profile is presented to the governor and he makes his determination, the Department of Economic Development prepares an offer letter that goes out to either the consultant or directly to the company. Primary point of contact is. And that offer letter is good for 30 days from the date it's issued. And it contains not only that discretionary grant, but any statutory tax credits or anything that the company may be eligible for if we're putting Georgia Quick Start on the table, anything like that. So it also includes the totals of the community offer. So we've got the full Georgia package going out on that offer letter. And again, the company has a 30-day window to accept. Part of that acceptance says that they will do a press release, either through the Department of Economic Development or through the governor's office. What's the best fit for that? And then the offer is in the company's hands. And typically we will get an answer back in 30 days, but sometimes we don't. And we are willing to have discussions to extend those offers, but that is on a case-by-case basis and up to the discretion of the department. And so
I saw a question along the way.
Sure.
As this profile is being prepared, does the demonstrated previous award in a community hurt or help a profile if there have been other awards?
I would never say that it hurts. I think that it helps, because it helps us see what we have done and what industries are looking in that community. So let's say we've incentivized something that's at a lower annual salary, or we'll say, okay, well, this project is bigger and better, so we're going to do more. But it also just helps us kind of be good stewards of these funds, and try to keep kind of a standard in mind and vary from that based on exponential job and investment creation, if that makes sense. So like larger projects or projects that pay higher salaries, things like that are going to tend to be incentivized at a higher per job rate. But I would never say that it hurts. It just kind of gives us a standard to go by.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like a neighbor in another industry who's already received an award can, having been a good steward, positions the
Right.
community to continue to, show that they can put these funds to great use.
Exactly.
Great, thank you. See if there are any other questions on the ask.
Sure. We do prepare, Tracy, what we call an MPV, or an economic impact report. This is a model that was created for us by Georgia Tech, and we use the NAICS code along with the job and investment creation ramp up, and the county that is being considered, and it basically gives us an output on how long it will take for the state to recoup its funds. And so that is a number, comes out in years. that the governor is provided as well as part of that profile.
Okay. Are there examples of any of this process online that would be useful to development authorities and economic development partners? Like, what does an MPV look like, or just thinking through out loud any of the acronyms?
I don't think we have anything out online. I know, we try to, but if anybody would like an example, I can see about sending somebody out one or sending one to you, Tracy, and you can distribute
Okay.
to the attendees.
Okay. Anything else on the ask? Who does the work and how the deals?
Do you want me to go ahead and go through the recommendation, or do you want to
Sure.
get a little bit further along in that process? Okay, so I'm gonna pick up. So once the company accepts our offer, we're going to prepare our MOU and P&A. Those agreements are what Sarah is going to talk about in just a second. But so I'm going to kind of just go through my process here. But once those documents are signed, there's a public posting of the grant that goes up on our website. Basically says that there's a signed agreement between the Department of Economic Development and the company, and that we're going to use whatever funding source in this amount to fund this project in XYZ location. And that's just something that we're required to do under law within 5 days of the signed agreement, signatures on those agreements. And at that point, we also issue our recommendation letter. So our recommendation letter goes to the Department of Community Affairs. And it basically is our commissioner recommending to Commissioner Nunn that the Department of Community Affairs award a grant to this company through whatever registered eligible applicant, whether that's a development authority, local government, state agency, etc. And it outlines, they're going to create this many jobs and this much investment for this amount of time. And that recommendation is good for 60 days from the date that the Department of Community Affairs issues the application.
Excellent. All right. So is that stage one? Negotiating the ask and
negotiating the ask,
crossing your fingers that it comes off the governor's desk.
Absolutely.
Okay. So after the recommendation, I'm thinking that we move, you mentioned signatures, we move into signed documents. And so Sarah, I want to turn to you to please tell us what are parties contractually obligated to do, and what tools or resources do they need on their team to do this well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tracy. So just to build off of what Denitha already alluded to, we use 2 agreements in Georgia, at least at the state level. Most communities will have their own separate MOU for the project as well, if there's an abatement or any other terms or conditions that are being offered at the community level. But at the state level, we use the MOU and the Performance and Accountability Agreement, which I'll call the PAA. So those 2, I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to show you a template of what those agreements look like. So this is kind of what you can expect to see. We use the same template for all projects. So no matter where you are in the state, no matter whether it's an EDGE grant or a REBA grant, you're gonna be seeing the exact same documents. So let me just share my screen here. So I'll start with the MOU. So we have both of these agreements are 3-party agreements. Largely the same people are involved in either. You're going to have the company as a signatory, the development authority as a signatory, and then our agency GDEC will be a party to the MOU, and DCA will be a party to the Performance and Accountability Agreement. The MOU really just outlines at a very high level the terms of the deal. Because that is sort of our role as GDEC in the process, is to agree to those high level terms. This is a blank template, so obviously it will be filled in by the time that you see it by our team, but just so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Excuse me. It's the high level deal terms. So a few things that we'll cover in here are the amount and size of the grant, the description of the project. This is probably one of the most important and involved pieces. because we'll be talking about, what's going to be happening at the business location, as well as the company's commitment in terms of jobs and investment. We do also include the average wage in this project description. While we don't use that at the state level as a factor in terms of clawbacks, it is a factor that we considered when we made that offer that Denitha was talking about. And so that information will be included in here. The other thing we lay out is the asset that we'll be paying for. So the, excuse me, I'm sorry, I get this cough every year around this time. The Development Authority plays a really important role in this process, specifically because you are the mechanism through which we can convey these grants to companies. So in the Georgia Constitution, we're prohibited from providing money directly to a company. That's where we rely on the development authorities to kind of be the conduit through which that money flows. What that means is that the development authority has to hold title to the grant funded asset for the duration of the performance period. So we typically accomplish that through your abatements if there's an abatement offered on the project. If there isn't, it will be through a sale leaseback transaction. It's really important to keep your attorneys involved here because obviously they can get into the nuts and bolts of this stuff. So just always, kind of keep them in the loop as to what's going on, especially when we're talking about these agreements. But you can always reach out to GDEC if you have any questions about the process, and we're happy to answer. This document also lays out the company's commitment, and I think probably one of the more important sections of this document is this section here. So this talks a little bit about the application that you'll have to fill out, which Sharon will touch on shortly. This is, where we, I apologize. This is where we really rely on you to kind of be in constant communication with the company. Obviously, you have to collect this information in order to provide it on the application. And in order to complete that application, it's really important that you keep those lines of communication open with the company so that you can get the information and submit it in a timely fashion. But this list here is a very high level outline of the types of information that we are going to be looking for in that application process. There's a section here about what y'all are committing to do. So obviously this project is going to have a positive economic impact on your communities. And in exchange for that impact, you are agreeing to be the conduit through which this money flows. You're agreeing to submit that application. You're agreeing to hold title to the grant funded asset for the duration of the performance period. These are all really important steps that we really rely on you for. Then you have our commitment as GDEC. Again, as Denitha mentioned, we are committing to supplying that letter of recommendation. We're also committing to supply the information about the economic impact on the project. So that's just really a high level about what's in the MOU. And then we just switch here to the performance and accountability agreement. Again, this is the agreement where DCA is the state party. And this is kind of the second piece where we really rely on your participation. So a lot of the information in here is the same as the information in the MOU. It's going to talk about the size of the award and what the asset is that we'll be funding. It's going to describe that project, as well as lay out the company's sort of performance standard. So what will we be measuring at the end of the performance period? Again, that's jobs and investment. If it is an expansion project where there is a retained jobs requirement, we'll include that information as well. But this is where, just sliding down the way here, where we are really going to be relying on you for this reporting requirement, right? So in Georgia, we do require semi-annual reports for these projects. That means twice a year, we are looking to you to reach out to the company and find out what's going on with the project. It's not an overly burdensome form that you have to fill out. It's pretty straightforward. There's just a few pieces of information that we need on the project. And it helps us. It's really important because it helps us monitor these projects, right? We don't know we are not in the communities every single day the way that you are. So you know better than us what's going on with a project. You know if there's having some construction delays. You know if they're having some hiring issues, labor issues, or anything like that. So we rely on you to report that information back to us. So twice a year, we like to check in on the project. The reason that we do that is because we are the ultimate goal is the successful completion of that project, right? If the companies are successful, then we as a state are successful. And so we'd like to know what's happening, what's going on with the project. Are they hiring? Are they meeting those job numbers that they committed to? Have they made the investment that they committed to? That information can only be passed up through you. You let us know whether that's happening or not. And then the purpose of the semi-annual report is so that as we're getting down to that last 12 to 18 months of the performance period, if there is an issue like some unexpected construction delay where, you know, they weren't able to get a hold, obviously we all know right now construction is a nightmare. They weren't able to get a hold of the materials that they needed in order to, you know, build out their facility, and it delayed their schedule by 6 or 8 months. It's helpful for us to know that information, because if we have to extend out the performance period at the end to give them a little bit more time to meet their jobs and investment goals, we can do that through this semi-annual reporting and monitoring. You know, as I'm sure you can all imagine, with COVID, we had a number of requests come in for companies that were slated to have their performance periods expire, you know, in 2020 or early 2021. A lot of those companies, or several of those companies, came to us and said, hey, you know, COVID happened, unexpected layoffs, so things like of that nature. And so we're able to kind of get the background and monitor those requests with your assistance. So reporting, I cannot stress enough, is so important. And it's where we really, really rely on you, because you have those long-term relationships with the company. One thing I will just mention to back up a little bit is compliance. So compliance within the state of Georgia just means that you have achieved 80% of your overall goal. So I know some communities do mirror this in their own local MOUs. So some of you may be very familiar with this threshold, but in case you're not, we require 80% overall compliance. So what that means is that at the end of the performance period, we take a snapshot of what has happened over the, let's say, 5 years of the performance window. As long as they've hit 80% of a combined average. So we take the jobs amount and the investment amount. So say, for example, you hit 90% of your jobs, 100% of your investment. We average that together. You have 90% compliance. Wonderful. Or 95% compliance. Wonderful. No problem. No clawbacks required. If that number does fall below 80%, like we're talking about anything less than that, then the state does require clawbacks. And so what would happen there is the company would be required to repay a portion of the grant, depending on how deficient they were in terms of performance. But those are really the important pieces of the legal documents. The other things I'll mention in relation to these legal documents that I think are important is just that it's really helpful for us at the state level to understand what your process looks like at the local level. So there's a lot of pots on the stove here. We're trying to coordinate an announcement. We're trying to finalize these legal documents. We're trying to get your local stuff finished. So it's really helpful for you to communicate any deadlines, public meetings that are associated with this process. So for example, if your development authority board is going to need to call a public meeting in order to approve the state agreements, it's helpful for us to know that, because then we can manage expectations with company in terms of timing. It's also really helpful to know if there's going to be any public action taken if real estate is going to be closed on. So it's really important that you communicate that with the state, with our project managers, because we need to make sure that we are planning accordingly and timing accordingly. So we don't want our public announcement to go out after a public meeting has already occurred. So then the governor doesn't have the opportunity, to really celebrate the project because the cat's out of the bag and everybody knows about it already. So it kind of loses some of its flair there. So that's the other point that I'll mention in terms of the agreements. It's just communication is really key. Letting us know of important dates or milestones that we need to be aware of and work around is really, really helpful. And we certainly appreciate your partnership in this process. Cannot stress that enough. We really, really do.
Thank you, Sarah. I heard a couple of things that brought to mind questions for me. And it's about personnel, the we, the you, the they, like folks are seeing today, who is the we on the GDEC and the DCA side, right? You guys are facilitating the process. As a development authority, who's doing a regular progress report? And is it just the attorney that you want to keep in the loop, or are you using a consultant to handle all your contracting and paperwork? What do you recommend, and what do you see as sort of the norm in personnel?
So in my experience, it really varies. Obviously, different development authorities have different level of resources. Some development authorities have a staff person who's responsible for that. Some development authorities don't have it, simply just don't have enough staff to be able to do that process. And so they look to other entities to be able to help them. I've seen a number of development authorities use outside grant writers. Obviously, they are helpful in the process because they do have a different set of experience. But in no way am I saying that's required, or, you know, it really depends on each individual development authority and your unique circumstances. If you have staff available that you dedicate to this process, then I mean, I'm sure that's sufficient. If you like to use a grant writer, then there's nothing wrong with that either. So there's plenty of people involved, and it really is just on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, great. And that person, would you advise that person stays sort of the project lead throughout the process? So when you're reporting in twice a year, it's that person filling it out and checking with the company and regathering the data, and or a consultant or entity outside?
I mean, it's definitely helpful to have some consistency, because then that person obviously has that institutional knowledge about the project and can convey information. But of course, there's no way to predict next week who's going to be in what role. So, while consistency helps, we certainly understand that, people change jobs all the time, and there's no way to guarantee that will happen.
Right. And you mentioned 5 years as an example. Is that a typical grant award period, 5 years, which would probably lead to personnel changes just inevitably?
Yeah. So our grants usually range anywhere from 30. The shortest I've seen is 24 months. That's not that common. Most of them, I would say the average project is 5 years. One thing I will mention, though, is that performance window, while it says 5 years, it's not actually 5 years. It ends up being longer than that, especially when we're talking about build out of facilities. So where a facility is being built out, we provide a grace period for companies to kind of get that facility up and running before we're really holding them to the commitment. So while a 5-year performance window is probably the most common, what that actually comes out to in the end is probably closer to 6 or 7 years, because from the time they've started construction on a facility to the time that the project is considered quote unquote complete, you could be looking at a little bit longer. So I would say on average, most projects are looking at a 5-year window, which could be a little bit longer than that.
Okay. And one last thing, you mentioned an extension if somebody's things are tight really near the end and they're not quite at that 80% threshold. They reach back out to you all for an extension. The
request should go to DCA first. So it's the development authority that has to make the request. So you can consult, of course, with your companies and see if that's even something that they're interested in. If the company makes the request and they say, yeah, we need more time, we're not going to make 80% by this, this date, then the development authority should reach out to DCA directly. Sharon will talk a little bit more about, the grant application process and as well as compliance throughout. But yeah, you'll reach out to DCA, and then DCA doesn't make those decisions in a silo. They consult with GDEC. So, our partnership with DCA is paramount in this process. We are in constant communication with each other from start to finish, from A to Z. So it's a group effort and a group decision, but you should direct the request to DCA.
Okay, good. And then one last question about personnel. You mentioned project managers, and I think that refers to GDEC staff and DCA staff, right?
Initially, I don't remember exactly in what context I said that, but initially the project is worked by a GDEC project manager. So when we're talking about, before we've officially transitioned the project from GDEC to DCA, so while we're still sort of doing the recruiting process, the offer letter, working on these legal documents, like I said, we're communicating with DCA, but we haven't made that like official handoff of the project. So during that period, our GDEC project manager is probably your primary point of contact. Then after that, of course, when we're going through compliance and reporting and that sort of thing, you'll be looking to the DCA team. The GDEC team is, of course, always available, and we are still available throughout the entire process, but DCA will be your primary point of contact once we've made that handoff.
Okay, great. And for any folks that are on the call that are just new to who the reps are, both the GDEC page has a list of regional reps across the state in all 12 regions, and DCA has the same on their website. Both usually found under the contact us about info. Let's see. Okay, so that moves us to the bulk of the work, Sharon, and I want you to walk us through however many steps you can get us through today, including accepting the award, something called special conditions, the all-important one, drawing down the money, and then, as we stated, ending with a zero balance so that it's been a successful award. So take us through those steps.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Sharon Alexander Jackson, and I'm the Economic Development Consultant for the REBA program. Today, I'll discuss DCA's REBA electronic process from A to Z. This will be a high-level review of the process, and we'll see what questions come up at the end. And keep in mind that the process for the electronic process for EDGE is exactly the same as REBA. So, write down your questions and we can talk about them at the end. So let me show you my slides. Can everyone see the first slide here?
Yep.
Okay, so this first slide illustrates the REBA electronic process. The process consists of 9 phases. Phases 1 through 3 include the P&A, the application and completeness items. Phases 4 through 6 include the award acceptance, and award administration. And then phases 7 through 9 include the continue award administration, the end of the performance period, and close out. DCA's electronic REBA process begins with when GDEC issues the award recommendation signed by Commissioner Wilson. The award recommendation includes the letter, the state MOU executed among the company, the authority, and GDEC partners, an electronic impact study, and the performance and accountability agreement, which is executed among the company, the authority, and DCA partners. Upon receipt of the award recommendation, DCA emails an invitation letter and an application link to the authority. The authority then has 60 days to submit the REBA application. During that 60-day window, the authority compiles the application, gathers all the supporting documents, and submits the items in the electronic portal. The DCA Field Services representative is available to provide technical assistance as needed during the application process. Upon receipt of the REBA application, DCA reviews it for completeness and then emails the authority regarding any outstanding completeness items. Typically, the company is copied in the completeness review. When the application is considered complete, DCA underwrites it and then makes a recommendation for an award and assigns a REBA award number. As soon as Commissioner Nunn signs the recommendation, DCA announces the award to the partners, state legislators, and uploads the award package in the electronic portal. The authority has 30 days to review and execute the award acceptance package. During the award acceptance phase, the authority must open a separate non-interest-bearing bank account. If the authority expects to take longer than 30 days to accept the award, please notify DCA. However, by the 30th day, the authority is responsible to upload the executed award acceptance package into the electronic portal and submit everything to DCA. At that point, we will review the award acceptance documents for completeness, and we forward them to DCA accounting. And DCA accounting is responsible for setting up the award or making a request for additional documentation. However, DCA accounting, when they're finished with their review and approve the award acceptance package, they will activate the file. And that is the point where the authority can begin active administration of the REBA award. During active administration, the authority must clear any special conditions that are tied to the award. During the award administration period, the authority is responsible for the semi-annual reports and drawing down the REBA funds. DCA makes the REBA funds available for drawdown only after the special conditions are cleared and the initial project report has been approved. Also, the authority is responsible for project oversight. Drawdown requests must be certified by the authority chair, and only authorized authority personnel may draw down REBA funds. Prior to the drawdown of funds, the authority gathers third-party cost and payment verification from the company for reimbursement of expenses that are included in the approved budget for the award. Assets financed with state funds must be publicly controlled, and all award funds must be drawn down and dispersed during the life of the project. The authority continues the award administration until the end of the performance period. If the performance standards are met and the award funds are drawn down early in the process, the company must maintain their performance through the project closeout. During the continued award administration phase, the authority submits semi-annual reports every June and December until the project ends. The authority may draw down remaining award funds with adequate cost and payment detail. Also, the authority is responsible for complying with DCA audit requirements prior to the closeout of either the EDGE or REBA award. Approximately 30 days before the end of the performance period, the authority must submit a final report, including a company letter to DCA for review for compliance, for review of project completion and compliance. As soon as DCA approves the final report, the field services representative will conduct a closeout site visit with the authority and company partners to make sure the project is complete. After the closeout site visit, DCA works with the authority to formally close the state award. A formal closeout letter and a closeout site visit report are uploaded into the electronic portal. And once the award is formally closed, all partners shall maintain their physical and electronic files for the next 3 years. So this is my last slide. This final slide highlights the 9 phases of the REBA electronic process. And although every project is different, each project begins with a P&A and ends with the formal closeout of the award in the electronic portal. The Office of Economic Development staff here at DCA and the field services representatives are always available to assist authorities during each phase of the electronic process. As you review this last slide, you may have identified the status of each of your REBA awards or EDGE awards. So please feel free to ask your questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. Those were great graphics to walk us through all of the steps. I'm feeling like step number 7, active administration, was where the rubber hits the road. There's a lot to do.
Yes, I'm trying to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah. So while all the steps are important, once the DCA's managing the process, Step number 7, the active administration included clearing the special conditions, reporting twice a year, June and December, drawing down the funds, and that continues for the grant period, which is typically, as Sarah mentioned, 5 years for most awards. So certainly having, I'm thinking of takeaways here, a consistent person assigned to the project would be fabulous to keep that institutional knowledge in place.
I agree. I think, and that's why I'll share my screen, that last slide again. Well, I'm just not that savvy. So that's the reason
No worries.
why I, just delineated the difference between award administration and continued award administration, because a lot of times during our projects, funds are drawn down early, and sometimes, early in the process, depending on what the funds are allocated to finance. And then a lot of times our company partners meet their standards early, or they exceed their standards early. And so, when that happens, when early performance occurs or when funds are drawn down early, sometimes, our partners want to close the award and we're not able to, because the contracts state that the performance period is for a certain period of time. And so when the award is made, there is an end date that we calculate based upon how the contracts read. And then for early performing projects, we do pay attention to that end date, and then the standards that have been met or exceeded by the company early on must be maintained until the end of the performance period. So that's the reason why, we distinguish between the beginning of award administration and then the continuance of award administration until the end of the performance period.
Great distinction. I'd like to field any questions now from anybody in the audience. Feel free to turn your microphone on and ask any questions that you have, and then give each of our panelists a moment to just sum up some good takeaways from the information that they've shared. As simple as something like it's a reimbursement grant, right? So let's see if there are any questions in the chat. And if anybody has questions they'd like to ask live while we have the experts in front of you. We'll go back to the top on the takeaways. Danitha, 2 or 3 key points about the ask process.
Just keep in mind that these are discretionary grants. The governor makes the decision. Can't always promise it, can ever promise it until he actually says, this is what we're going to do. And once that ball gets rolling, just keep in constant communication with us in the Department of Community Affairs as we go throughout the process. I think communication is really the ultimate takeaway, probably for Sarah, Sharana, and myself.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, Danitha took the words right out of my mouth. Communication is really key. Obviously, as I mentioned, there are a lot of pots on the stove. It's very easy for things to get lost. We're working on a lot of things simultaneously. Local MOU, state MOU, announcement. There's a lot happening with these projects, especially right at the beginning, flurry of activity. So it's really helpful for you to stay in communication. And then on the back end, it's really helpful for you to stay in communication, because it's really easy for these projects to kind of just take on a life of their own, and we're not, working on a million things having to do with them at the, as we were in the beginning. So communicating with us about status of project and what's happening is equally as important, because we are not just kind of handing the project off after we get the agreements finalized. It is our responsibility to see them through, and we rely on you all as development authorities a lot for that. So yeah, I can't emphasize communication enough.
Thank you, Sarah. Sharon, you gave
Yes.
us the 9 steps.
I did. And I third the communication piece. I think that it is very important for the development authorities to stay in communication with us. You're our local partner. And so, like Sarah said, you know more about these projects because you're closer to them than we do. And because the performance periods are years long, it is very easy for um, you know, for us to get lost along the way. So reach out to us, find out what the status of the awards are and what your next steps need to be. And just keep in mind that if you haven't done all 9 of the steps that I highlighted and we haven't closed out the award in the electronic portal, the award is still open. And so, and a lot of times I think, development authorities, if they've had staff come and go, they haven't been able to experience the full arc of of the award, meaning they haven't gone through all 9 of the steps. And so they may not be aware that closeout is essential. So just, yes, absolutely reach out to us to understand the status of the projects, the awards, and what the next steps need to be. And if it's time to close, how to go about that. And we're here for you every step of the way, and we're all partners. And so we like to work closely together to make sure that we are handling the awards appropriately.
Thank you. We have a couple minutes here, so I'd like to take just a moment to describe for anyone who has yet to go through this process, as Sharon just mentioned, or has yet to fully close it out and go through all the steps, that there is a software tool to help manage the flow of all of this paperwork. Denitha and Sharon and Sarah, are all of the steps that we described in the software tool eCivis, or is that just once you're accepting the award? And before that, are they just by email, or are they in paper?
So eCivis is just for the application and then all of the administrative steps after, like reporting and things like that. When we're talking about offer letters being issued, putting together that full offer package, when we're talking about the MOU, PAA, all that is going to be done either, through exchange of emails, things like that. So that will not be through the eCivis portal. The eCivis portal won't come into play until we're at the application phase.
Okay, so I'm hearing that you're going to manage your inbox with all of the back and forth emails from the ask to the application. And then Sharon, once the application period begins all the way through closeout, you're going to manage that in an online software portal.
That's correct, but we still do a lot of communicating via email or over the phone. So eCivis is really just a platform where the special conditions are cleared, drawdown requests occur. It's where project reporting happens, and closeout. Well, continued award administration happens inside of eCivis, and then closeout. But communication with us would still happen outside of the eCivis system via email or over the phone.
Okay. And then I know my personal role, although it's just been a year or two that I've been in this role, is to go on site, barring a pandemic or other world scenarios, go on site for periodic visits at the startup, maybe the interim and the closeout, to the development authority or to the project site if tours are allowed, and be in person. Any other contact? It sounds like email, software portal, and occasional in-person takes care of it all, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for the expertise that you've shared with all of us today. Thank you for all the partners in the state for the great work you do for Georgia. If there are follow-up questions, if you didn't know the experts before behind the scenes, you know them now. Feel free to reach out, myself included, and any of my fellow regional reps across the state of Georgia. Thank you for attending this Lunch and Learn. I hope it was useful on the REBA and EDGE A to Z, and good luck.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
See
all.
y'all.
Okay, see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.